The historic Texas Senate impeachment trial involving controversial Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton ended with an acquittal, despite facing a number of federal crimes and accusations that he had used state funds to aid in hiding an affair. So, look, there's a lot of stuff here. He was also accused of firing top deputies in the AG's office who had reported him to the FBI for these alleged crimes. So, witnesses, including former senior officials who served under Paxton, had testified in this trial that the Attorney General had abused his office by helping out a friend, a struggling Austin real estate investor named Nate Paul, investigate and harass his enemies, delay foreclosure sales of his properties, and obtain confidential records on the police that were investigating him. So again, corruption, bribery, all sorts of very, very significant charges. Now, in return, House impeachment managers said that Paul had paid to renovate Paxton's Austin home and helped him carry out and cover up an extramarital affair with a former Senate aide. So again, very serious allegations of corruption and bribery that seem to have concerned Republican House members, especially since he had asked them to pay for a $3.3 million settlement his office negotiated with 4 of the whistleblowers who were, again, who had alleged they were improperly fired for reporting Paxton to the FBI. So that worried Republicans, and he's like, okay, we're going to have to look into this guy. We're going to have to file for impeachment. And a lot of the House Republicans were really, really on board for this. Now, the agreement, by the way, the $3.3 million settlement was rejected by the legislature, but would have eliminated the need for a public trial. That led to a House investigation that found that Paxton had likely broken numerous state laws. So that led to the impeachment, that bombshell report. But wait, if it was such a bombshell report, then how come Ken Paxton was just acquitted? Politics. So Senate Republicans ended up circling the wagons. 2 of them did vote to convict, but only 2 of them. It needs a supermajority. So I'm going to get into the details of why this ended up the way that it did. So for one, Paxton's lawyers actually were pretty brilliant. You got to call it the way it is, all right? They had a pretty good defense. They played on the conservative distrust of federal law enforcement, the fact that this was a political trial and not an actual criminal trial. So again, this was impeachment, the same thing that happened with Trump. And of course, you had, again, lawyers that were pretty good at poking holes in certain allegations. Dan Cogdell, one of Paxton's lawyers, said Paul's complaint that he was mistreated by the Department of Justice employees who executed a raid in his home and business in 2019 deserved scrutiny. So that played, of course, on the distrust of federal law enforcement, of the FBI, that a lot of the Republican Party now buys into. The bribery claim challenged. The defense ended up providing documents purporting to show that the couple had paid for the work done on their Austin home, which again, central to the bribery is, well, Paxton helped out Paul in exchange for work done on their house. But then if they had the documents that Paxton actually paid for it, Paxton and his wife, again, hole in the defense, right? However, the prosecution had their own evidence refuting that, showing that Paul had spoken to contractors about repairs in Paxton's home, and it was noted that Paxton had allegedly paid for the work the same day the whistleblowers reported him to the FBI, those whistleblowers that Paxton ended up punishing. So it seems like a CYA operation on that. There's more. And what really hurt the prosecution was Paxton's alleged lover. Okay? She ended up taking the fifth to last minute. I think they were really counting on her testimony to prove that Paul had hired her in return to, to Paxton for this quid pro quo arrangement that they allegedly had. And so all of that stuff matters quite a bit, but I think what played the biggest role here, not just in the case, because again, you can present all the facts that you want, but at the end of the day, you still have to have the politics, and you have Republicans that control the Texas Senate. And so what played the biggest role in all of this was outside money. So there was a group called Defend Texas Liberty. They ended up dropping millions of dollars in defending Ken Paxton. Now, that PAC ended up being funded largely by oil and gas millionaires Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilks. As the Daily Beast points out, Dunn and Wilks, through their PAC, ended up making generous contributions to decision makers while paying for mailers, billboards, in order to intimidate rural Texas senators sitting as jurors in the Texas Senate Court of Impeachment. They also set aside a budget to pay $50 a tweet to eligible social media posters who tweeted or posted things that are pro-Paxton. So to defend him online. $50 a tweet. Holy, that's a lot. So this is something that we've seen before, paying an army of Twitter trolls. Okay? It works. That's not all. Presiding Judge Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick also collected a $1 million campaign contribution and a $2 million forgivable loan from Defend Texas Liberty back in June before the trial. Gee, I wonder if that had anything to do with it. You know, the whole, maybe they wanted to return on their investment into Dan Patrick. Perhaps a favorable outcome for someone who apparently is pretty easy to bribe and will always stick up for oil and gas. Now, not only did they fund allies of Paxton, but they also threatened to fund primary challengers against any senator who would vote to convict Paxton, which would, of course, see him permanently removed. As Axios noted, it was made clear to Texas GOP senators that they would face a very well-funded primary opponent in their next election if they voted to impeach. So there you had that. But wait, there's more. Also, conservative media played a big role. So according to a top GOP strategist, the goal was to ignore mainstream media that actually talked about the facts in this case and to fire up the grassroots using publications like the Post Millennial, the National Pulse, Steve Bannon's War Room, and Turning Point USA's Charlie Kirk. The strategist noted that just how vital Charlie Kirk's support was. Quote, he had his people posting senators' office numbers and was giving them out on his show, driving the senators absolutely crazy. So there's all that pressure. So pressure from constituents, possible constituents, pressure from fundraisers, of course, and from Paxton himself. Now, he also had Tucker Carlson on his side and was called one of the toughest, best attorney generals in the country by former President Donald Trump. So there's that pressure as well. And so here you had Texas Republican senators cowed by money, reelection, and their own constituents, as well as outside media figures. And so, not surprising, you end up with the same outcome as when the Democrats impeached Donald Trump. So, and again, given how this is basically just a political removal from his job and not actually a criminal trial, makes sense. Now, that said, Paxton's not out of the woods yet, okay? Paxton is facing federal charges. He's been indicted for felony securities fraud and will be tried for those crimes next year in Harris County. And he's also being investigated by a federal grand jury in San Antonio for felony bribery and abuse of office based on these same facts as those the Texas Senate considered. Not only that, but the Texas State Bar has sued to disbar him. So, facing a lot of issues here. That said, the fact that he was not removed from his post by the Texas Senate is a result of letting the Republican Party police itself, which is to say, it's the same as when you let any corrupt agency police itself. It's going to investigate itself and find that it did nothing wrong. That's it. But aside from these other indictments, the result of this is that you've got Ken Paxton going right back into office. And you can be damn sure that Ken Paxton is going to be going after his enemies. Now, the two Republican senators that voted to convict him, they're not up to for re-election until 2026. But they're going to be probably facing a lot of pressure here, as well as, of course, the people who brought this impeachment in the first place. So you can be very, very sure that he's got plans to come after them politically. Now, Paul, by the way, Nate Paul is also facing some issues, which could end up being bad for Paxton later on. Now, Paul was indicted in June on 8 felony counts of bank fraud, and it faces a federal criminal trial next summer where he could end up making some sort of plea deal that could end up maybe hurting Paxton in the end. We don't know for sure. But right now, Paxton is back. He has survived, and I'm pretty sure he's going to start by making some people's lives hell.